Eleanor Merrill had always been the kind of woman who collected stray things. Her Victorian home in Whispering Pines was filled with oddities others had discarded: antique buttons in old mason jars, weathered books with cracked spines, and mismatched teacups that cluttered every available surface. Her husband James used to joke that she could find value in dust if given the chance. "It's not about what something is worth," she would tell him, running her fingers along the rim of a chipped saucer. "It's about the story it carries." At 62, with her silver-streaked auburn hair and eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled, Eleanor was now collecting memories instead of objects. James had been gone for 3 years, claimed by a heart that had simply grown too tired to continue its steady rhythm. Their daughter, Claire, lived 2 states away with her husband and their twins, visiting on holidays and occasionally during summer break. Eleanor filled her days tending to her garden, volunteering at the local library, and hosting the monthly book club that had become her social lifeline. The emptiness of her home had become a companion she had reluctantly learned to live with, like an unwelcome houseguest who refused to leave. On a crisp October morning, as leaves painted in amber and crimson drifted past her kitchen window, Eleanor received a letter that would change everything. The envelope was cream-colored, bearing her name in unfamiliar handwriting. No return address. She sliced it open with the silver letter opener James had given her on their 25th anniversary, carefully unfolding the single page inside. "Dear Mrs. Merrill, my name is Olivia Hayes. You don't know me, but I believe you knew my mother, Catherine Hayes, née Wilson. I recently discovered among my mother's possessions a series of letters between her and your late husband, James Merrill, spanning from 1982 to 1985. I would not normally intrude upon someone's life in this manner, but the content of these letters suggests that your husband may have been my biological father. My mother passed away 3 months ago, and I find myself with questions only you might be able to answer. I understand this may come as a shock. If you are willing to meet with me, I will be staying at the Lakeside Inn in Whispering Pines for the next 2 weeks. My contact information is below. With respect, Olivia Hayes." Eleanor's hands trembled as she read the letter once, then again. The teacup beside her had gone cold, forgotten. Catherine Wilson. The name stirred something in the recesses of her memory. A young woman with laughing eyes who had worked with James at the university before Eleanor and James were married. Before Claire was born. Before their life together had truly begun. She placed the letter on the table and walked to the window, watching as a cardinal alighted on the bird feeder hanging from the old oak tree. Its vibrant red feathers stood out against the autumn landscape like a drop of blood on parchment. James had been dead for 3 years. Their marriage had spanned nearly 4 decades. They had raised a daughter together, built a home, created a life woven from thousands of ordinary days strung together. How could she possibly reconcile that with what this letter suggested? Eleanor spent the day in a fog, moving from room to room of her house as if seeing it through a stranger's eyes. The photos on the mantel, James with his arm around her at their 30th anniversary party, Claire's graduation, the twins' christening, seemed to watch her with new scrutiny. Had there been signs? Moments when James seemed distant or distracted? Times when he'd mentioned this Catherine with a particular inflection in his voice? By evening, Eleanor had made her decision. She would meet this woman, this Olivia, who claimed to be James's daughter. Not for Olivia's sake, but for her own. Because living with questions was far worse than living with difficult truths. The next morning, Eleanor called the number in the letter. The voice that answered was low and melodic, with a slight hesitation that suggested nervousness. "Miss Hayes? This is Eleanor Merrill. I received your letter. Mrs. Merrill. Thank you for calling." The voice on the other end sounded breathless. "I wasn't sure you would. I'd like to meet you," Eleanor said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "Would tomorrow afternoon work? There's a cafe on Maple Street called Percolate. 1 o'clock. Yes, that would be perfect. Thank you." Eleanor hung up the phone and pressed her palms against the cool countertop, wondering what she had just set in motion. The cafe was busy when Eleanor arrived, the lunch crowd lingering over coffee and dessert. She chose a table by the window, ordering a pot of Earl Grey to calm her nerves. At precisely 1 o'clock, the bell above the door chimed, and Eleanor knew instantly which of the entering customers was Olivia Hayes. She was tall and slender, with dark hair cut in a sleek bob that framed a heart-shaped face. But it was her eyes that made Eleanor's breath catch, hazel with flecks of gold exactly like James's, exactly like Claire's. Olivia scanned the room, and when her gaze landed on Eleanor, recognition flickered across her features. She approached the table with measured steps. "Mrs. Merrill?" she asked, her voice the same one Eleanor had heard on the phone. "Please call me Eleanor," she replied, gesturing to the chair across from her. "And you're Olivia?" "Yes." Olivia slipped into the seat, placing a worn leather satchel on the floor beside her. "Thank you for meeting me. I know this must be difficult." Eleanor studied the younger woman, noting the way she twisted the silver ring on her right hand, a nervous gesture that reminded her painfully of James. "You look like him," Eleanor said softly, the words escaping before she could consider them. Olivia's eyes widened slightly. "Doi. I don't have many pictures, just the ones my mother kept." The waitress approached, and Olivia ordered a black coffee. When they were alone again, Eleanor folded her hands on the table. "You mentioned letters in your note. Between your mother and James." Olivia nodded, reaching into her satchel and withdrawing a bundle tied with faded blue ribbon. "There are 23 of them. The earliest is from January 1982, the last from December 1985. Eleanor stared at the bundle but made no move to take it. "And your birth?" "February 1983. The year before Claire was born. The year before Eleanor and James had moved to Whispering Pines from the city." The timeline aligned with painful precision. "Did your mother ever tell you about James? About their relationship?" Olivia's coffee arrived, and she wrapped her hands around the mug as if seeking its warmth. "Not until she was diagnosed with cancer last year. She said she didn't want to take secrets to her grave. That I deserved to know where I came from." She paused, taking a sip of her coffee. "She told me they met at Westfield University, where they both taught in the English department. She said they fell in love, but he was engaged to someone else." "To me," Eleanor said quietly. "Yes." Olivia's gaze dropped to the table. "When she found out she was pregnant, she didn't tell him. She took a position at another university across the country. She said she didn't want to ruin his life or yours. But she kept the letters." "Yes." Olivia's fingers brushed against the ribbon. "They continued writing even after she left." "He didn't know about me, Mrs. Merrill." "Eleanor. The letters stopped right around the time I was born. My mother never replied to his last one." Eleanor felt a strange mix of emotions washing through her. Anger at James and this woman who had loved him, grief for what this revelation meant about her marriage, and an unexpected tenderness toward the young woman sitting across from her, who had lived her entire life without knowing her father. "May I?" Eleanor asked, reaching for the bundle. Olivia hesitated only briefly before sliding it across the table. "Of course." Eleanor untied the ribbon carefully, selecting a letter from the middle of the stack. She recognized James's handwriting immediately, the slanted, elegant script she had seen on birthday cards and grocery lists, and the margins of books for decades. "My dearest Catherine, the autumn here is magnificent this year. The campus is ablaze with color, and I find myself thinking of you each time I pass the bench beneath the maple tree where we used to grade papers together. Eleanor and I have set a date for the wedding. Next June. She is everything I could hope for in a partner, kind and thoughtful and brilliant in her own quiet way. And yet, I find myself questioning if I am making the right choice. Is it possible to love two people at once? Or am I simply afraid of the future I've committed to? I miss our conversations. No one challenges my ideas the way you did. No one makes me laugh at my own pretentiousness." Eleanor folded the letter, unable to continue. The words blurred before her eyes, not from tears but from the disorienting sensation of seeing a familiar person from an angle she had never before contemplated. "I'm sorry," Olivia said, reaching out but stopping short of touching Eleanor's hand. "I shouldn't have brought these to you." "No," Eleanor said firmly. "I'm glad you did." She returned the letter to the bundle and retied the ribbon. "Tell me about yourself, Olivia. What do you do? Where do you live?" The change of subject seemed to relieve Olivia. "I'm a marine biologist. I work at the Coastal Research Institute in Oregon. I'm not married, but I have a partner, David. We've been together for 8 years. A scientist. James would have been proud." The words felt strange on Eleanor's tongue, acknowledging this parallel reality where James was Olivia's father. And you have a daughter? Olivia asked cautiously. Claire. Yes. She's 40. She has twins, a boy and a girl 10 years old now. They fell into an awkward silence, the weight of what remained unsaid hanging between them. What do you want from me, Olivia? Eleanor finally asked, her voice gentle but direct. Why did you seek me out? Olivia looked up, her eyes, James's eyes, meeting Eleanor's with unexpected determination. I want to know him. I spent my whole life wondering about the other half of my DNA. Now that my mother is gone, you're the only person who can tell me who he was. Not just as a name on my birth certificate, but as a person. Eleanor considered this. The request seemed both enormous and entirely reasonable. He was a good man, she said at last. Flawed as we all are, but good. He loved poetry and classical music. He could never remember to put the cap back on the toothpaste. He made terrible pancakes but insisted on making them every Sunday anyway. She smiled faintly at the memory. He had a way of seeing the beauty in broken things. Olivia nodded, drinking in these details like someone parched. I have photos, Eleanor continued. Albums full of them. And his books with his notes in the margins. His favorite chair still sits in our living room. She paused, making a decision. Would you like to come to my house? Not today, but perhaps tomorrow. I could show you these things. Tell you more. The look of naked hope on Olivia's face was answer enough. That night, Eleanor called Claire. Her daughter answered on the third ring, the sound of children laughing in the background. Mom? Everything okay? We weren't supposed to talk until Sunday. Eleanor sank into James's chair, drawing strength from its familiar comfort. Everything's fine, sweetheart. But there's something I need to tell you. Something I just found out myself. She told Claire everything, about the letter, the meeting with Olivia, the bundle of correspondence that suggested James had loved another woman before their marriage. So I have a half-sister, Claire said when Eleanor finished, her voice unreadable over the phone. One who's only a year older than me. It seems that way, yes. A long silence followed, filled only by the distant sounds of Claire's household. Are you angry? Eleanor asked at last. I don't know what I am, Claire admitted. Shocked certainly, but angry? I'm not sure. Dad's been gone for 3 years. It's not like finding this out changes who he was to us. No, Eleanor agreed. It doesn't. What about you, Mom? How are you handling this? Eleanor considered the question carefully. I'm processing. It was before we were married. Before you. It doesn't erase the life we built together. Do you believe her? This Olivia person. Ido. She has his eyes, Claire. And his way of tilting her head when she's thinking. It's uncanny. Another pause. Do you want me to come home? I could be there by tomorrow night. No, darling. Stay put. I'll handle this. But I wanted you to know. After they hung up, Eleanor sat in James's chair until well past midnight, surrounded by the artifacts of their shared life, wondering how it was possible to know someone so intimately and yet discover, years after their death, that they had kept such significant secrets. Olivia arrived at Eleanor's house the following afternoon carrying a bouquet of wildflowers and a bottle of wine. Her eyes widened as she took in the Victorian home with its wraparound porch and gabled roof. This is beautiful, she said as Eleanor ushered her inside. It looks like something from a storybook. James and I bought it when it was hardly more than a shabby old house that no one wanted, Eleanor explained, leading Olivia into the living room. We spent years restoring it room by room. Olivia's gaze traveled over the bookshelves that lined the walls, the piano in the corner, the collection of vintage cameras displayed on a side table. Please sit, Eleanor said, gesturing to the sofa. Would you like some tea? Or would you prefer to open the wine? Tea would be lovely, thank you. While Eleanor prepared a tray in the kitchen, she could hear Olivia moving around the living room, probably examining the photos and mementos that filled the space. When she returned, she found the younger woman standing before the mantel, studying a black and white photograph of James in his 30s, laughing as he flew a kite with a young Claire on a windy beach. That was at Cape Cod, Eleanor said, setting the tray on the coffee table. Claire was about 5. The kite kept crashing, but James was determined to keep it airborne. "He looks happy," Olivia said softly. He was. Eleanor poured tea into 2 cups. Most of the time, at least. He struggled with periods of melancholy. Writing was both his passion and his burden. Olivia turned away from the photograph and accepted the offered cup. "My mother said he was brilliant. That his mind worked differently than anyone else she'd known." That was true, Eleanor agreed. He saw connections between things that others missed. It made him an exceptional teacher and writer, but sometimes a challenging husband. His attention could be inconstant. They sipped their tea in silence for a moment before Eleanor rose and moved to a large oak cabinet in the corner. She unlocked it and withdrew several leather-bound albums, placing them on the coffee table. "I thought we might start with these. Photos from throughout his life. Before me, during our marriage, with Claire as she grew." For the next several hours they pored over the albums together. Eleanor narrated the images, James as a young academic with wild hair and earnest eyes, James and Eleanor on their wedding day, James cradling newborn Claire, James at 40, at 50, at 60, his hair gradually silvering but his eyes retaining that same intensity. Olivia asked questions, sometimes hesitantly, sometimes eagerly. What was his favorite book? Ulysses, though he claimed to hate it half the time. Did he have a good relationship with his parents? Complicated with his father, tender with his mother. Was he religious? Not conventionally, but he believed in what he called the poetry of existence. As the afternoon light began to fade, Eleanor brought out a box she'd prepared that morning. "These are some things I thought you might like to have," she said, placing it between them on the sofa. "Some of his books, a few letters he wrote to me over the years, a scarf he always wore in winter. And this." She withdrew a small wooden box. "His fountain pen. He wrote everything with it. I think he would want you to have it." Olivia stared at the box, her composure finally cracking. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she asked, her voice breaking. "I show up out of nowhere, telling you your husband had a relationship with my mother, that he's my father, and you welcome me into your home. You give me his things. Why?" Eleanor considered the question carefully. "When James died, I was devastated. Not just because I lost my husband, but because I lost the person who knew me best in the world. The person who held half of our shared memories." She reached out, hesitantly touching Olivia's hand. "I look at you and I see pieces of him. Different pieces than the ones I knew perhaps, but still him. How could I not want to know you?" Olivia wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. "I was prepared for you to hate me. To think I was lying or trying to get something from you. What would be the point of that? Besides," Eleanor added with a small smile, "you're a terrible liar. Your face gives everything away. James was the same way. Claire too. Will I meet her? Claire, I mean. Would she want to meet me?" Eleanor hesitated. "Claire is processing this news. She'll need time. But yes, I believe she'll want to meet you eventually. Your family, after all." The word hung between them, family, with all its complexity and promise. As Olivia prepared to leave, box of mementos carefully packed in her car, she turned to Eleanor at the door. "I'm staying in town for another 10 days. Would it be all right if I came back? Maybe we could have dinner sometime." "I'd like that," Eleanor said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. "Very much." After Olivia drove away, Eleanor returned to the living room and sank into James's chair. The house felt different somehow, as if the introduction of this new presence, this new narrative, had shifted something fundamental about the space they had occupied together for so many years. She picked up one of the albums they had looked through, opening to a page showing James in his mid-30s, around the time he would have known Catherine Wilson, around the time Olivia would have been conceived. She studied his face, wondering what he had been thinking when the photo was taken. Had he been missing Catherine? Had he known she was pregnant with his child? And what would he think now, knowing that Eleanor had met Olivia? Would he be grateful? Ashamed? Relieved that his two worlds had finally converged? Eleanor closed the album, deciding that such questions were futile. The past was immutable. What mattered now was what she chose to do with this unexpected twist in her story. Over the next week, Eleanor and Olivia met several times, for lunch at a local bistro, for a walk through the botanical gardens James had loved, For dinner at Eleanor's house, where she prepared James's favorite meal of roast chicken with rosemary potatoes. Each meeting revealed new facets of their connection. Olivia shared stories of her childhood in California, raised by a mother who had loved literature as much as James had. Eleanor described the years of her marriage, the joy and struggle, the ordinary moments that constituted a life together. On Olivia's third visit to the house, Eleanor showed her James's study, preserved almost exactly as he had left it. His desk still held stacks of books, his reading glasses folded neatly beside a half-filled journal. "I haven't been able to clear it out," Eleanor admitted. Claire offered to help, but it felt like erasing him somehow. Olivia moved around the room slowly, as if in a museum, careful not to disturb anything. What was he working on when he died? A collection of essays about memory and identity. He'd been writing it for years. Eleanor crossed to the desk and picked up the journal. This was the last one he was working on, about how we construct narratives from fragments of experience, how we become the stories we tell ourselves. She hesitated, then held the journal out to Olivia. "Would you like to read it?" Olivia accepted it with reverent hands. "Are you sure?" "Yes. I think he would want you to." As Olivia settled into James's desk chair to read, Eleanor excused herself to make tea. In the kitchen, she found herself gripping the counter, overcome by a wave of emotion she couldn't immediately identify. It wasn't jealousy or resentment as she might have expected. It was something more complex, a sensation of boundaries dissolving, of past and present merging in ways she couldn't have anticipated. When she returned with the tea, Olivia was wiping tears from her cheeks. "His words," she said, gesturing to the journal. "It's like he's speaking directly to me, even though he never knew I existed." Eleanor set the tea tray down and took a seat opposite Olivia. That was his gift. He could speak to the universal in all of us. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "Olivia, there's something I'd like to propose." Olivia looked up expectantly. James's papers, his unpublished work, his journals, his notes, they're significant. I've been contacted by several universities interested in acquiring them for their archives, but I've been reluctant to decide what to do with them.
Elinor met Olivia's gaze.
"I'd like you to be part of that decision, and part of organizing them if you're willing. You have a perspective on him that might see value in things I would overlook." "You would trust me with that?" Olivia asked, clearly stunned. "I would. You're his daughter. You have a right to help shape how he's remembered." The word daughter hung in the air between them, the first time Eleanor had spoken it aloud in reference to Olivia. "Claire will be visiting next month," Eleanor continued. "I think the three of you should discuss it together. If you could arrange to come back then." Olivia's face lit up with hope. "I'd like that. Very much." That evening, after Olivia had gone, Eleanor sat at her kitchen table writing in her own journal, a habit she had adopted after James's death as a way to process her grief. "Today I gave Olivia James's journal to read. Watching her connect with his words, I realized something I hadn't fully acknowledged before. In finding her, I have found a new way to remember him. Not just as my husband or Claire's father, but as a man whose life touched others in ways I never knew. There is a strange comfort in this expanded vision of him, as if the James I knew was just one facet of a more complex person than I had understood. It doesn't diminish what we had. It enriches it. I wonder what he would make of Olivia and me, finding each other after all these years. Would he be horrified at the collision of his separate worlds? Or would he see it as some form of poetic justice, the universe's way of completing a circle he left open? Claire arrives in 3 weeks. She says she's ready to meet her half-sister. I hope that's true. I hope the three of us can find a way forward that honors both what was and what might be. Eleanor closed her journal, suddenly weary but at peace in a way she hadn't felt since receiving Olivia's letter. She had spent so many years being defined by her relationships: daughter, wife, mother, widow. Now she was charting new territory, becoming something for which she had no ready label. Whatever it was, she decided as she prepared for bed, it felt like growth. The day Claire was due to arrive, Eleanor woke before dawn. She moved through her morning routine with careful precision, making coffee, watering the plants on the porch, choosing a simple blue dress that James had always said brought out the color of her eyes. Claire's flight was scheduled to land at 10:45 a.m. Olivia would join them for dinner at 6 p.m. The hours between stretched before Eleanor like a vast, uncharted sea. She had spoken to Claire almost daily in the weeks leading up to her visit, trying to gauge her daughter's true feelings about meeting Olivia. Claire had been measured in her responses, expressing curiosity tinged with apprehension. "It's just weird, Mom," she had said during their last call. "Finding out Dad had this whole other person out there. Someone who's basically my sister but who I've never met." "I understand," Eleanor had replied. "But think how strange it must be for Olivia. She didn't discover she had a sister until her mother died." Now, as Eleanor drove to the airport, she rehearsed what she would say to Claire in person. How she would explain the unexpected bond she had formed with Olivia. How she hoped Claire would be open to forming her own connection with this newfound family member. Claire emerged from the arrival's gate looking tired but composed. At 40, she resembled Eleanor more than James. The same heart-shaped face and delicate build, though her hair remained stubbornly dark while Eleanor's had long since turned silver. "Mom," Claire said, embracing Eleanor tightly. "You look good. As do you, sweetheart. How was your flight?" "Long, turbulent over the mountains. But I made it." Claire adjusted her bag on her shoulder. "So, tonight's the night." Eleanor nodded, taking Claire's suitcase. "Olivia's bringing dessert. She's nervous, Claire. She wants you to like her." Claire's expression softened slightly. "I'll be on my best behavior, I promise. It's not her fault after all. None of this is." The drive home was filled with safer topics. The twins' latest achievements, Claire's work at the architectural firm, the renovations she and her husband were planning for their kitchen. But as they pulled into the driveway of the Victorian house, Claire grew quiet. "It feels different," she said as they entered. "Being here now, knowing what we know." Eleanor understood. The house had been the setting for their family story for decades. Now that narrative had been revised, expanded to include characters they hadn't known existed. Claire spent the afternoon unpacking and resting, while Eleanor prepared for dinner, a simple meal of James's favorites: roast beef, Yorkshire pudding, glazed carrots. As she worked, she found herself wondering what Catherine Wilson had cooked for James during their time together. What foods had he loved that Eleanor had never known about? At precisely 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Eleanor wiped her hands on a dish towel and went to answer it, giving Claire, who had emerged from the guest room, a reassuring smile as she passed. Olivia stood on the porch, looking elegant in a green dress that accentuated her eyes, holding a white bakery box tied with string. "Cheesecake," she said, offering it to Eleanor. "The bakery said it was their best seller." "Perfect," Eleanor replied, accepting the box. "Please come in." She led Olivia into the living room where Claire waited, standing by the fireplace, one hand resting on the mantel as if seeking support. For a moment, the two women simply stared at each other. These daughters of James Merrill, separated by a year in age and a lifetime of experiences. "Claire," Eleanor said, "this is Olivia Hayes." "Olivia, my daughter Claire." "It's good to meet you," Olivia said, extending her hand. Claire hesitated only briefly before taking it. "You too. I've heard a lot about you. All good things, I hope?" A ghost of a smile crossed Claire's face. "More or less." She gestured to the sofa. "Please sit. Mom's been cooking all afternoon." The initial conversation was stilted, with Eleanor carrying most of the burden of keeping it flowing. She asked questions that allowed both women to contribute, about their work, their hobbies, their memories of childhood. Gradually, as they moved to the dining room for dinner, the atmosphere began to thaw. Claire asked Olivia about her research with marine mammals, genuinely interested in her descriptions of whale migration patterns. Olivia inquired about Claire's twins, smiling at stories of their antics. By the time Eleanor served the cheesecake, something remarkable was happening. Claire was showing Olivia photos of the twins on her phone, and Olivia was laughing at a video of them attempting to build a snow fort. "They look like Dad," Olivia said without thinking, then froze, glancing uncertainly at Claire. But Claire merely nodded. "Thomas especially. He has the same cowlick that Dad could never tame. I noticed that in the photos your mother showed me, that little swirl at the crown. It drove him crazy," Claire said, smiling at the memory. He tried every hair product known to man, but nothing worked. I have it too, Olivia admitted, turning her head to reveal the same distinctive swirl at her crown. My mother used to call it my question mark. Claire stared at the cowlick, then began to laugh, a genuine unforced sound that broke the last of the tension between them. That's exactly what Dad called it too, his eternal question mark. After that, they moved to the living room with cups of coffee, and Eleanor watched in quiet amazement as her daughter and Olivia began to discover each other, comparing notes on their childhoods, their education, their adult lives. There were moments of remarkable synchronicity. Both had studied abroad in Paris during college. Both had broken their left arms falling from trees as children. Both preferred dogs to cats, but had ended up with feline companions anyway. It's genetic, Claire joked. The cat thing has to be. Later, when Olivia excused herself to use the restroom, Claire turned to Eleanor with wonder in her eyes. She's so much like him, Mom. It's uncanny. I know, Eleanor said softly. That's what I've been trying to tell you. Do you think he knew? About her, I mean. Eleanor shook her head. No. She showed me all the letters. Her mother never told him she was pregnant. I think she truly believed she was doing the right thing, letting him build his life with me without complications. Claire was silent for a moment. It's strange. A month ago, our family narrative was simple, you, me, Dad, the twins. Now it's expanded, complicated. Life rarely gives us simple narratives, Eleanor said. We just pretend it does because it's easier that way. When Olivia returned, Claire asked her about her plans for the remaining days of her visit. Learning that Olivia had intended to drive up the coast to visit some of the small towns James had written about in his essays, Claire made an impulsive offer. Why don't I come with you? I know those towns well. Dad used to take me to them when I was growing up. I could show you his favorite spots. The look of joy that bloomed on Olivia's face was answer enough. The next morning, Eleanor stood on the porch waving as Claire and Olivia drove away in Claire's rental car, headed for a day of exploration along the coastal highways James had loved. The sight of them together, heads bent over a map, laughing at something one of them had said, filled her with an emotion she couldn't quite name. It wasn't quite happiness, nor was it sorrow. It was something more complex, a recognition of the strange ways life could unfold, revealing patterns no one could have predicted. While they were gone, Eleanor decided to finally tackle a task she had been postponing for 3 years, sorting through James's study to prepare his papers for donation to the university archive. She began with his desk, carefully cataloging each notebook, each folder of correspondence, each draft of his essays. As she worked, she found herself thinking about the conversations she and James had never had, about Catherine Wilson, about Olivia, about the choices he had made before their marriage that had created ripples they were only now feeling. Did she wish he had told her? Would it have changed anything if he had? Eleanor wasn't sure. The knowledge might have altered the course of their marriage in ways she couldn't imagine. Or perhaps it would have made no difference at all, merely adding another layer to the complex history they shared. In the bottom drawer of his desk, she found a small wooden box she had never seen before. Inside was a collection of items that made her breath catch. A pressed wildflower, a small polished stone, a ticket stub from a Mozart concert dated October 1982, and a photograph of a young woman with laughing eyes who could only be Catherine Wilson. Eleanor sat back in James's chair, holding the photograph. So he had known. Or at least, he had cared enough about Catherine to keep these mementos hidden away, treasured but never acknowledged. She thought about showing these items to Olivia, then decided against it. Some secrets deserved to remain so, especially when revealing them served no purpose but to complicate already tender emotions. She returned the photograph and other items to the box, placed it back in the drawer, and continued with her work. By the time Claire and Olivia returned, flushed with sea air and animated by shared discoveries, Eleanor had filled 3 boxes with organized papers and had made significant progress in cataloging James's literary legacy. "Mom, you should have seen it," Claire exclaimed as they entered the study. "The lighthouse at Point Harbor. It's exactly as Dad described it in his essay Beacons." Olivia read the passage right there on the cliffs. It was It was perfect. Olivia smiled, more relaxed than Eleanor had ever seen her. Claire showed me the cove where you all used to picnic, and the bookshop in Millfield where Mr. Merrill, where Dad, used to spend hours browsing. The word Dad slipped out naturally without self-consciousness. Eleanor noticed that Claire didn't flinch at hearing it. It sounds like you had a wonderful day, Eleanor said, genuinely pleased. We did, Claire confirmed, her eyes bright with excitement. And we've made plans for tomorrow as well. We're going to visit Dad's favorite hiking trail at Ravens Point. Eleanor looked between the two women, one her daughter by birth, the other her husband's daughter by a connection she'd never known about, and felt a strange sense of completeness, as if a circle that had been broken for decades was finally mending itself. I found something while you were gone, Eleanor said, gesturing to the neatly organized boxes. James's papers. I think they're ready for us to review together, to decide what goes to the university archives. The three women spent the evening sorting through James's literary legacy, sharing memories and discoveries. Eleanor watched as Claire explained to Olivia the significance of certain annotations in the margins of James's manuscripts, and as Olivia identified themes in his work that neither Eleanor nor Claire had recognized before. He was obsessed with the idea of parallel lives, Olivia observed, examining a series of essays James had written in the late 1990s. Look at how often he returns to the theme of choices creating branching realities, lives unlived running alongside the ones we choose. Claire nodded slowly. I never connected those dots before, but you're right. Even in his fiction, he often created characters who glimpsed what might have been if they'd made different choices. Perhaps he was thinking of his own life, Eleanor suggested quietly. The path he took with me, and the one he didn't take with your mother. Olivia looked up, her expression thoughtful. Do you think he regretted his choice? Eleanor considered the question carefully. No, she said finally. I don't think he regretted the life we built together. But I think he wondered sometimes about what he'd left behind. We all do, don't we? Wonder about the roads not taken. The week that followed was one of discovery and connection. Claire and Olivia spent their days exploring James's favorite places, while Eleanor continued the work of organizing his papers. In the evenings, the three women shared meals, stories, and increasingly comfortable silences. On the night before Claire was scheduled to return home, they sat on the porch watching fireflies illuminate the garden, drinking the last of a bottle of wine Olivia had brought. I've been thinking, Claire said into the companionable quiet. The twins have a school break next month. They've been asking to visit Grandma's house. Would it be all right if I brought them for a week? And, she glanced at Olivia, maybe you could come back then too? They should meet their aunt. Olivia's eyes widened with surprise and hope. I'd love that. I'd have to arrange time off work, but I think I could manage it. Good, Claire said decisively. It's settled then. Eleanor looked at her daughter with quiet pride, recognizing the generosity of spirit that had always been Claire's defining quality. Later that night, as Eleanor prepared for bed, she found Claire waiting for her in the hallway outside her bedroom. Thank you, Claire said simply, embracing her mother. For what, sweetheart? For showing me how to handle this with grace. I was so angry when you first told me about Olivia. Not at her or even at Dad, really. Just at the situation. At having to recalibrate everything I thought I knew about our family. Eleanor stroked her daughter's hair. It's been an adjustment for all of us. But you never faltered. You just opened your heart and made room for her. You've always been like that, finding space for stray things, for people who need a place to belong. Eleanor smiled, remembering James's teasing about her collections. Life is too short for pettiness, Claire. Your father taught me that, among many other things. The next morning, Claire departed for the airport with promises to return soon. Olivia would be staying another 3 days before heading back to Oregon, and Eleanor found herself looking forward to the time alone with her. After Claire's departure, they settled into a rhythm of shared meals, walks through town, and continued work on James's papers. Olivia proved to have a meticulous eye for organization and a deep appreciation for the nuances of James's writing. I wish I'd known him, she said on their final evening together, as they sat in James's study surrounded by the nearly completed archive. Not just through his words or through stories, but as a person. I wish that too, Eleanor admitted. He would have loved you, Olivia. Not just because you're brilliant and kind, but because you see the world the way he did, always looking for connections for the stories beneath the surface. Olivia's eyes filled with tears. Do you think my mother did the right thing? Not telling him about me. It was a question Eleanor had pondered many times since discovering Catherine Wilson's existence. I think she made the choice she thought was best with the information she had. She knew James was engaged to me, that he was building a life with me. She chose to step aside, to raise you on her own rather than disrupt that. But if she'd told him, Eleanor interrupted gently, everything would have been different. For all of us. Maybe better in some ways, maybe worse in others. But different. And we can't know what that different would have looked like. Olivia nodded, wiping away a tear. I keep thinking about what might have been. If I'd grown up knowing him, knowing Claire as my sister. That's natural. But don't let what might have been overshadow what is and what can be. You found us now. Late, yes, but not too late. The next morning, as Olivia prepared to leave, Eleanor presented her with a carefully wrapped package. What's this? Olivia asked, surprised. Open it when you get home, Eleanor instructed. It's just something I want you to have. They embraced on the porch, promising to speak often and to meet again when Claire returned with the twins. After Olivia's car disappeared down the street, Eleanor returned to the quiet house that suddenly felt emptier than it had in years. She wandered through the rooms, touching objects that now held new meanings. The piano James had played, the books he had read aloud to Claire, the chair where he had sat grading papers for decades. In his study, she found a feather that must have fallen from Olivia's hair clip during their work on the archives. She picked it up, running her fingers along its delicate edge, marveling at how light it was despite the weight of all it symbolized. 1 month later, Eleanor's house once again filled with voices as Claire arrived with 10-year-old twins Thomas and Lily. Olivia joined them the following day, arriving with arms full of gifts and barely contained excitement about meeting her niece and nephew. The children, initially shy around this new aunt they'd only just learned about, quickly warmed to Olivia's genuine interest in them and her gift for making science fascinating. By the second day, Thomas was trailing after her in the garden as she explained the complex ecosystem that supported the butterflies he loved, while Lily begged Olivia to braid her hair the way you do yours. They've adopted her completely, Claire observed to Eleanor as they watched from the kitchen window, while Olivia taught the twins how to skip stones across the pond in the local park. It's like she's always been part of their lives. Children adapt more easily than adults, Eleanor replied. They don't carry the same baggage we do about how things should be. The visit unfolded with a pattern of daily adventures, trips to the local science museum where Olivia knew several exhibits by name, hikes along trails James had documented in his essays, picnics in spots that held special meaning. In the evenings, the adults would sit on the porch after the children were in bed, sharing stories and building bridges across the decades they had spent apart. On the third night, as Claire put the twins to bed, Olivia turned to Eleanor with hesitation in her voice. I opened your gift when I got home, she said. The journals, Dad's journals from the years right after I was born. I've read them twice now. Eleanor nodded. She had debated giving those particular journals to Olivia, unsure if it was the right choice. But ultimately, she had decided that Olivia deserved to know her father's thoughts during those formative years, even if he hadn't known of her existence. Did they help? She asked. Yes, Olivia said, her voice thick with emotion. There's an entry from February 1983, the month I was born. He wrote about dreaming of a child with hazel eyes, a little girl who kept reaching for him but staying just out of reach. He didn't know why the dream affected him so deeply. Eleanor reached for Olivia's hand, squeezing it gently. Perhaps on some level he sensed you. The connection between parent and child is profound, sometimes transcending ordinary understanding. Do you really believe that? I do, Eleanor said firmly. James always had an unusual sensitivity to things others missed. It wouldn't surprise me if some part of him knew you existed, even if his conscious mind didn't. They sat in contemplative silence until Claire joined them, carrying a bottle of wine and 3 glasses. The little monsters are finally asleep, she announced, pouring generously. Tomorrow they want to visit the lighthouse again. Olivia promised to explain how it works. I might have oversold my knowledge of lighthouse mechanics, Olivia admitted with a laugh. I'll have to do some research tonight. As the conversation flowed easily around her, Eleanor felt a profound sense of rightness. The family she had built with James had expanded in unexpected ways, becoming something new and precious. The pain of discovering his secret relationship with Catherine had not disappeared entirely, but it had transformed into something more complex, an acceptance that the man she had loved had been more multifaceted than she had known, with depths and contradictions she was only now beginning to fully appreciate. The following morning brought rain, canceling the lighthouse expedition. Instead, the twins begged to explore the attic, a mysterious realm they had only glimpsed during previous visits. There's nothing but old furniture and boxes up there, Eleanor protested, but the children were insistent, and Claire and Olivia seemed equally curious. I've never been up there either, Olivia pointed out. Maybe we'll find buried treasure. Eleanor relented, and the five of them climbed the narrow stairs to the attic, Eleanor switching on the single bare bulb that illuminated the dusty space. Trunks and boxes were stacked against the eaves, old furniture draped with sheets stood like ghostly sentinels in the corners, and a collection of outdated suitcases formed a precarious tower near the chimney. The twins immediately began a systematic exploration, pulling dust covers from furniture and peering into boxes with delighted exclamations at each discovery. Look! Old photographs! A typewriter! Can I have it, Grandma? What's this weird thing? Eleanor, Claire, and Olivia followed in their wake, providing explanations and sharing the stories behind various objects. That weird thing is a slide projector, Claire explained to Lily. Before digital photos, people took pictures on film, and some of them were made into slides that you could project onto a wall. Can we see? Does it still work? Thomas asked eagerly. I don't know, Eleanor admitted. We haven't used it in years. But the children's enthusiasm was infectious, and soon Eleanor found herself digging through boxes of slides, while Claire attempted to dust off the projector and determine if it was operational. I think it just needs a new bulb, Claire announced after examination. I bet we could find one in town. Thomas, meanwhile, had discovered a large trunk in the corner with James's initials painted on the side. What's in here, Grandma? He called, already attempting to lift the heavy lid. Eleanor crossed to him, a box of slides in her hands. I'm not sure. That was Grandpa's trunk from his college days. I don't think I've opened it since we moved here. Together they raised the lid, releasing the musty scent of old paper and forgotten memories. Inside lay a carefully preserved collection of James's early life, textbooks, notebooks filled with his distinctive handwriting, a college pennant, a collection of concert programs. As they began to explore the contents, Olivia let out a soft gasp, reaching for an envelope tucked between the pages of a poetry anthology. What is it? Claire asked, moving to her side. With trembling hands, Olivia withdrew a black and white photograph from the envelope. It showed a young James and an equally young woman with Olivia's eyes and smile, standing beneath a blossoming tree, their arms around each other. My mother, Olivia whispered. And Dad. Eleanor moved closer, studying the photograph. It was clearly from their university days. Both looked impossibly young, radiantly happy, unaware of the complicated future that awaited them. There's something written on the back, Olivia said, carefully turning the photograph over. In James's handwriting were the words, Catherine and James, spring 1982. In the midst of winter I found there was, within me, an invincible summer. Camus. I've never seen this photo before, Eleanor said softly. Are you upset? Olivia asked, looking at her with concern. Eleanor considered the question honestly. No, she said finally. I'm glad he kept it. Glad we found it. It's part of his story, part of yours. And now part of ours. The discovery of the photograph led to further exploration of the trunk, which yielded additional traces of James and Catherine's relationship, a few more photos, some notes she had written him, a pressed flower with no explanation. The twins, losing interest in these adult matters, had moved on to explore other corners of the attic, but Claire and Olivia remained absorbed in piecing together this fragment of their shared history. They really loved each other, Claire said, examining a particularly tender note Catherine had written. Yes, Eleanor agreed. I believe they did. Does that bother you? Olivia asked hesitantly. Eleanor smiled gently. Olivia, I was married to your father for almost 40 years. We built a life together, raised a daughter, shared joys and sorrows that bound us together in ways that transcend any youthful romance. What he felt for your mother doesn't diminish what he and I had. If anything, knowing that he was capable of such deep feeling before he met me only confirms what I always knew about him, that he had an extraordinary capacity for love. Later that afternoon, after the rain had cleared, Eleanor sat on the porch watching as Olivia led the twins in constructing an elaborate fairy house from twigs, moss, and pebbles collected from the garden. Claire joined her, handing her a cup of tea. She's good with them, Claire observed. She is. They adore her already. Mom, Claire said after a moment of silence, I've been thinking about something. About what happens to this house when… Well, you know. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. When I'm gone, you mean? You can say it, Claire. I'm not afraid of it. Claire nodded. Right. When you're gone. I always assumed the house would come to me, and someday to the twins. But now you're wondering about Olivia, Eleanor finished for her. Yes. She's Dad's daughter too. She should have a claim on his home, his things. Eleanor reached for her daughter's hand. I've been thinking about that as well. I've already spoken with my lawyer about updating my will. The house and most of its contents will still come to you, but I want to ensure that Olivia receives her fair share of James's legacy. His papers, his books, certain pieces that would mean something to her. That feels right, Claire said with obvious relief. I was afraid you might think I was being selfish for even bringing it up. Not at all. It's practical and it's fair. And it's what your father would want. As the days of the visit dwindled, a new tradition emerged. Each evening after dinner, the family would gather in the living room, and Eleanor would read from James's essays, sharing his observations about life, love, and the natural world that had been his constant inspiration. The twins listened with surprising attention, occasionally interrupting with questions, while Claire and Olivia sat side by side on the sofa, their similar profiles illuminated by the soft lamplight. On the final evening before everyone's departure, as the twins slept upstairs and the three women sat together sipping tea, Olivia made an announcement. I've been offered a position at Coastal University, she said. It's only an hour from here. I'd be establishing a new research program on marine ecosystem conservation. Eleanor and Claire exchanged glances of surprise and delight. Are you going to take it? Claire asked. Olivia nodded. I think so. David is on board with the move. He can work remotely from anywhere. And being closer to all of you, it just feels right. When would you start? Eleanor inquired. September. That gives us the summer to find a place to live, get settled. You could stay here while you look, Eleanor offered immediately. The house is too big for just me anyway. That night, after Claire and Olivia had gone to bed, Eleanor sat alone in James's study, contemplating the photograph of Catherine and James that now stood framed on his desk, alongside other family photos. She picked it up, studying their young faces. I hope you'd approve of how this has all turned out, she said softly to James's image. Your daughters have found each other. Your grandson and granddaughter have a new aunt who adores them. And I have expanded in ways I never imagined possible. She set the photograph down and opened her journal, recording the events of the day and her reflections on the changes the past months had brought. As she wrote, she realized she was no longer simply documenting her grief and recovery. She was chronicling the evolution of a family, the weaving together of threads that had once seemed irreconcilably separate. 2 years later, Eleanor stood on the porch of her Victorian home, watching as her extended family gathered for Claire's surprise birthday party. Thomas and Lily, now 12, were setting up an elaborate scavenger hunt throughout the garden with their cousin Emma, Olivia and David's 6-month-old daughter, sleeping peacefully in her carrier nearby. Olivia emerged from the house carrying a platter of cheese and fruit, her face animated as she discussed something with David, who followed with a tray of drinks. They had settled in a charming cottage just 20 minutes away, close enough for regular visits but maintaining their own space as they adjusted to parenthood. Claire and her husband were due to arrive within the hour, ostensibly for a casual family dinner that had become a monthly tradition since Olivia's relocation to the area. Little did Claire know that friends and extended family had been secretly invited to celebrate her 42nd birthday. As Eleanor surveyed the scene, she marveled at how naturally their reconstructed family had knit itself together. Claire and Olivia had developed a relationship that defied easy categorization. Part sisters, part friends, part co-conspirators in managing Eleanor's occasional stubborn streaks. Their husbands had found common ground in their love of craft beer and obscure history podcasts. The twins adored their role as older cousins to baby Emma, already planning all the things they would teach her as she grew. The garden that James had loved now flourished under the combined care of Eleanor and Olivia, who had discovered a shared passion for native plants and pollinators. James's study had been transformed into a nursery for Emma's visits, while still preserving his books and the photograph of him with Catherine that had come to symbolize the complex tapestry of their family history. Eleanor's collection of oddities had been supplemented by items Olivia brought back from her research trips: unusual shells, smooth stones from distant beaches, feathers from exotic birds. Each item had a story, just as Eleanor had always believed they should. A gentle hand on her shoulder drew Eleanor from her reverie. She turned to find Olivia beside her, holding Emma, who had awakened from her nap. "Penny for your thoughts?" Olivia asked, adjusting Emma's sun hat. Eleanor smiled, reaching to stroke the baby's soft cheek. "I was just thinking about collections, about how all my life I've gathered stray things, believing they carried stories worth preserving. And now," Olivia prompted, "and now I see that the most important collection isn't the objects in this house, but the people who fill it. Each of you carries stories that intersect and diverge, and create something more beautiful than I could have imagined." Olivia nodded, her eyes, James's eyes, crinkling at the corners just as his had done. Dad wrote something similar in one of his journals, about how families are like rookeries, separate nests that together form a community, a shared space of refuge and return. Eleanor looked out over the garden where Thomas was demonstrating to Lily and David how to properly skip a stone across the pond, a skill Olivia had taught him 2 years earlier. The sunlight filtered through the leaves of the oak tree, casting dappled shadows across their faces. "A rookery," Eleanor repeated. "I like that." As if on cue, a pair of cardinals alighted on the bird feeder hanging from the oak, the same feeder Eleanor had been watching when she first read Olivia's letter years before. Their vibrant red feathers caught the afternoon light, no longer like drops of blood on parchment but like flames, warm and vital against the green backdrop of the garden. "They mate for life, you know," Olivia said, following Eleanor's gaze to the birds. "Cardinals." "Yes," Eleanor agreed. "But even they build new nests each season." The birds took flight together, disappearing into the branches of a nearby pine. In the distance, a car door slammed, followed by Claire's laugh floating on the breeze, the birthday girl arriving early, about to be surprised by the gathering of those who loved her. Eleanor took Emma from Olivia's arms, cradling her great-grandchild as they moved to join the others in the garden. The weight of the baby was substantial despite her small size, just as the weight of feathers could be significant when gathered together, each one light as air, but collectively capable of flight.